The idea of thought leadership research was already embedded in Spotify. I think the challenge with any company is asking how what we do in any role ladders up to revenue, it ladders up to growth, it ladders up to those key priorities and metrics for the business. That was the battle I had to fight.
In this episode, I talk shop with Spotify's Jenny Haggard, the person who heads thought leadership at the $20 billion a year global streaming music platform, which more recently has also become a leading audiobook and podcast platform. Jenny will explain how she runs thought leadership at Spotify and also why. She'll also talk about why, of all the jobs she's had at Spotify over the last 12 years, thought leadership is the one that she loves the most. And she'll give advice to every thought leadership professional and others who are thinking about making it a career about the biggest things she's learned in getting ahead in the field. Jenny, it's great to have you on our show.
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
So I just want to let you know you're a lot younger than me, but when I started in the thought leadership business back in 1987, it was not even called thought leadership. It was called a bunch of things, and there was no common name for it. But at the time, people in these roles largely worked for management consulting firms like McKinsey, like the company I worked for back then, a company called Index Group. And consumer companies did not have people with thought leadership in their titles. So it's great to meet somebody in a consumer company with thought leadership in their title. And I think your predecessor at Spotify, who's now at Netflix, Marianne Moreira, she did have or does have thought leadership in her title at Netflix.
Yes. And we'll hopefully dive into this a little bit more on the difference of those roles and how it's really evolved at Spotify.
So you joined Spotify 12 years ago. It was a roughly $1 billion company, and now it's grown 17 times that size. So anybody being at the same company 12 years, astronomical growth in revenue, a number of customers, 700 million streaming customers, something like that. What has kept you there these 12 years? Because it's unusual to hear, and I was at the consulting firm I mentioned 10 years, but what has kept you there 12 years?
Yeah, for those of us that have been here a long time, we like to joke that it feels like 6 different companies for 2 years each because, and I joke, but it's true because the Spotify that I started at in 2014, it was basically a startup. We'd only been around for about 8 years and in the US for only 3 years. And we were really trying to convince the world that streaming was a good thing, that streaming was positive. And then you look at the Spotify of today, where we've got, like you said, over 751 million fans using the platform. And we've paid out over $11 billion to the music industry just last year alone. So those are 2 very different companies. And for me, I've stayed for a few reasons. First is the growth, and not just of the company, but my growth as well. In my tenure at Spotify, I've done, see if I can remember back that far. I've done sales strategy, content marketing, branded content monetization. I led creative strategy for a bit. And now I'm in my role as head of thought leadership. So most people have to go to different companies to get that kind of, that range of experience. But I feel so lucky that I've been able to grow with Spotify. So definitely growth has kept me there. I think the brand, I love the Spotify brand. I used it in my daily life. And I remember when I started in marketing, I made a promise to myself that I would only work at brands that I actually believe in and that I think are positive. And so I feel very lucky that a brand that I love, in the same way that I have chosen it, it has chosen me for all of that time too. And of course, I'll say the last reason I've stayed, it's cliche for a reason, the people. I remember when I interviewed at Spotify, I had 9 different interviews and I walked away from each one thinking, wow, everyone is not only really smart, like really brilliant, but also really kind. And I think smart and kind is probably the rarest combo in tech. And I have found it and I'm not going to let it go. So I'm really grateful that I've been able to build a reputation here. I'm a big believer in building instead of hopping.
So back then, 12 years ago, did you look at joining this company, Spotify, did you say to yourself, this might be a risk? Like these guys may not be here in 5 years or whatever?
Yeah, absolutely. So the reason I joined Spotify, I used to work on the media side at a media agency. It's part of WPP. And one of the Spotify reps came in. And at that time, I worked on a massive hotel chain. And they came in and they pitched this idea. And I thought, wow, this is really cool. And I think this could actually drive results for the brand. It was the first, this was unbeknownst to me at the time. This was the first time that they had not only pitched something like this, but sold it. And I didn't know this. I thought, wow, this is great. This is really going to help us. And so I did that deal with them. And so it really opened my eyes to how they use data so creatively. I think that's one of our strengths is yes, we have first party data, but also how we express it and how we put storytelling and context around it. So that was why I joined Spotify, because I had been a customer in several ways as a user and as an advertiser, and decided to go over. And my parents were like, what is this company? We've never heard of it. What is this? And so, yeah, at that time, we were a lot smaller. We were, really, again, that startup. And so it was a risk, but looking back on it, I'm so glad I did it. And I'm constantly thinking in my head, what's the next Spotify? What are these next companies that are going to be as big as we are now? And really watching their growth and their trajectory with great joy.
Well, Jenny joined Spotify in 2014. The company got its start 8 years earlier in Stockholm, Sweden. Daniel Ek and Martin Lorentzen launched Spotify as an online platform to stream popular music and to stop the piracy of online music that the industry was suffering from the likes of sites like Napster. 2 years later, by 2008, Spotify had a free service that was supported by advertising. The founders hoped that listeners would spend a certain amount of money a month to get the ad-free version. Spotify's business grew rapidly to $3.3 billion in revenue by 2016. At that point, Apple had entered the streaming music business, offering exclusive deals to stars like Taylor Swift, who made their records available first through Apple. Now, despite Apple entering the music business, in 2016, Spotify also entered the audiobook market. Today, it has 500,000 audiobooks, as well as 7 million podcasts on its platform. And as of late last year, Spotify has more than 750 million users, 290 of which pay for a subscription. Spotify also generated about $20 billion in revenue last year, of which about 11% came from advertising. You look at OpenAI or look at Anthropic, $100 billion in revenue.
A lot faster than us. Yeah, the length gets shorter and shorter every year.
Yeah. Okay, so you have the thought leadership title at Spotify. That obviously, to me, signifies that Spotify sees thought leadership as important. Just as our prior interview with Richard Murphy, formerly head of thought leadership at ServiceNow. ServiceNow sees thought leadership as really crucial. What about Spotify and your key goals in educating brand marketers? What are you trying to achieve thought leadership for on behalf of Spotify?
Yeah. So first, I'll give you some background on the thought leadership role at Spotify. So the title and person you mentioned before, they sat exclusively in the research function, which was great because there was a lot of rigor around the research and it got us some really good insights. I think the challenge of that is that there was not a cohesive marketing strategy around it. There was not a strong plan to get that research out into market and make sure our clients knew about it. So the role that I'm in, I pitched it to the head of marketing at the time. I said, I really believe that we need a marketing lead on thought leadership. And luckily they supported me. So the role now, my role as the head of thought leadership is really to be the conductor, not the whole orchestra. So I'm trying to really, get people on board, galvanize them internally to then deliver things that galvanize people externally. So that's a little bit of background. I think when I started at Spotify, we had two challenges. We had to convince people of the power of Spotify and convince people of the power of audio, so it was like a two-front war. We had a lot of ground to cover. Now, I believe that people respect Spotify. They know Spotify advertising. They understand the power of our platform. I think what marketers are still missing in the realm of audio is that they have not readjusted their marketing plans to make room for sound, which has really become the foundation of culture. It has, really grown over the years. And so it not only captures attention and evokes emotion, but it consistently outperforms other forms of digital media. So that's what I'm really passionate about, showing marketers the power of sound, absolutely, and also the unique power of Spotify. We are bigger than just a format. We are this brand, this powerhouse that can hopefully help marketers achieve their goals. So that's what I'm really, passionate about trying to nail home to people.
Interesting. So would it be fair to say that there still is a perception out there among advertisers and maybe even agencies that sound equals radio, and radio was always 5% of our total marketing spend. And so, yeah, and maybe radio's going away, so maybe that 5% should go to zero, or is that kind of the perception that you're trying to change?
Spot on, Bob.
In fact, according to market researcher eMarketer, radio advertising was an even smaller piece of the total media advertising pie in the US in 2024, just 2.4% of the total spend. What's more, commercial radio revenue in the US has dropped precipitously over the last 20 years by an astounding 56% in 2025 compared with 2005. It's not a pretty picture.
So the research that we just rolled out recently is called the Sound On era. And the whole point of it is to help people understand that in the same way that the definition of entertainment has evolved over the years, it used to mean mail-in DVDs, now it means so much more. Audio has gone through that same evolution, and marketers need to catch up. So the Sound On era research we did, we interviewed, we got feedback from over 5,000 consumers, 105 marketers, and then we interviewed 30 experts. This is kind of like what you do on your podcast. We interviewed 30 experts in fields of AI and voice and futurism and academia and just really interesting places to understand the future of media. So, I think the best thought leadership really gives not, a rear view mirror look back, but a look around the corner, a look at what's coming. And so that's what we tried to do, is show how the intersection of audio and AI is accelerating the rise of active audio, that audio is not what you just said, a radio ad or a jingle. It is so much more than that. And at Spotify, we know this. We've built a lot of products that are more than just audio. So really convincing marketers, showing marketers, like hopefully once we show them, not tell them, they can see the power of it themselves.
Almost sounds like Facebook started in 2007?
Earlier than that, I think.
Earlier than that's right. When you look at advertising revenue in, say, newspapers versus Facebook alone, US and Canada, and you see the Facebook ad curve go up like this and the newspaper ad curve go down like that, there was an inflection point where at some point Facebook and probably Google with search was able to convince the majority of advertisers your dollars are much better spent with Facebook and Google than in certainly the newspapers. That advertising curve for Facebook just went like this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's what we're building. I would say that's what we have built. And now we're really trying to get advertisers on board with that vision. So we've spent a lot of resources and a lot of time moving to be a more automated platform. So really making it easier for advertisers to buy, create, and measure on Spotify. We've seen the benefits of that. More advertisers are coming over and doing that. And we're just helping. I believe we're helping them. We're giving them more insights. We're giving them more knowledge about their business, and we're enabling them to reach their fans. Just like people come to Spotify to be fans of creators, we're trying to help brands connect with their audience of fans too.
Describe your thought leadership group there and how many, what their roles are, and maybe where you're going with this group.
Yes. So the truth comes out. So we do not have a thought leadership team at Spotify. I loved in your book that you talk about, I think it's, a few key roles, right? And I'll say we don't have dedicated, people that only focus on thought leadership in research, in editorial, in comms, in channel. We don't have that. And so my job as the head of thought leadership is to, again, be that conductor of the orchestra where, I couldn't do my job without especially our great research and insights team. So I tell them what we're trying to achieve in market, the message that we're trying to get across, or this problem that we're trying to solve for advertisers. And they go and do what they do best, which is think about the research. I'll partner with them on it to really make sure we're nailing those messages and asking good questions, I think is really what good research is about. I'll partner with our channels and our content team to make sure that we're expressing that in the right way. I'll work with our comms team to get earned press on that. Our comms team is amazing in that regard. But my job, as the head of thought leadership, I think about the Sound On era that we just released. I put together the master brief for it. I got alignment from leadership across the organization, across the company, really in different areas of podcasting and creator relationships and things like that. I wrote the report. So we got the research back from our research partner, Bold Insight, who was wonderful and absolutely fabulous to work with. They gave us a 150, 200 slide deck of amazing insights. I need to turn that into a story to tell the market, right? So I have to write that content. I have to really think about what we're trying to say. And then I also plug that in. I brief all of our partner teams to then go do what they do best and get that work out. So again, very much the conductor of that orchestra. And I want to be able to do my job without all of those amazing people. So I actually think, there's pros and cons to everything. I think a pro of this is that, at Spotify, we're really scrappy. You think about some of those tech companies we just talked about, tens of thousands of employees, sometimes hundreds of thousands of employees. At Spotify, we're 8,000 or 9,000 people. And I know from experience, it is a lot easier to turn around a speedboat than it is a cruise ship. So the way that we're able to be nimble and flexible and move in that way, I think is definitely a pro. And because all the people that I work with, me included, are tapped into other projects, we're all doing other work, we're able to bring that to the thought leadership. So it makes it much, much more connected to business outcomes, to business priorities, to what we're trying to achieve as an overall company, instead of just in the silo. So, yeah.
Yeah. So was it hard to sell leadership, or was that Marion's job before on this? We needed somebody in charge of thought leadership, and what that means is XYZ. Was that a hard sell at first or not?
Yes, in the sense of, Marion's wonderful. I worked with her when she was here. She's so good at what she does. And so the idea of thought leadership research was already embedded in Spotify. I think the challenge with any company is asking how what we do in any role ladders up to revenue, it ladders up to growth, it ladders up to those key priorities and metrics for the business. That was the battle I had to fight, was to say, I want this to be a priority for Spotify. I want this to be something that is measurable, something we can prove its value and its worth. And so, I'm sure in your job, that's an ongoing battle, right? I think it's really important to have alignment early on with leadership on, what thought leadership is. And so continuing to work through that, absolutely. But I'm really thrilled with how supportive the organization has been to have me in this role and to be able to not only create the content, but then go out and share it and to really make sure that we're getting Spotify in front of that audience that we care so much about.
Yes, which is, a lot of people will say to me, well, thought leadership research, isn't that the same thing as market research? And what I will tell them is, well, you do market research, you don't share that with the public generally.
Exactly.
To help you with your brand, or to fix a product that's not selling well, or a marketing campaign that's not doing well. You keep that to yourself.
Yes.
But leadership research, you go public with, because you are trying to move an audience to think differently about some issue.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if you have a point of view that you think is going to better the world or better the industry, it's best that everyone have access to it. That's my belief.
Yes. What aspects of your job do you like the most, and why?
Oh, well, I'll first say this is my dream job. I really love what I do. I couldn't say that for some of my career. I've been at Spotify for 12 years. I wasn't happy all of those years, to be very clear. So the role that I'm in now for the past 2 or 3 years, I'm so happy. I love the work. And I feel much more connected to what we're doing as a company and as a business. Like, I really feel passionate about driving business outcomes within that role. So my favorite parts of the job are the storytelling. I love being able to take the research and really think about what the larger picture is. So instead of looking at the stat of the data point, really thinking about the insight and what that leads to. So I love the storytelling. I also love the opportunity to inspire people with that thought leadership. I see people's eyes light up when I explain something, a piece that we've done or a POV that we have, and seeing the shift is really, really exciting. And for me, I believe everyone on earth is given a skill and a talent, and it's meant to be used for good and meant to be, not hid under a bushel basket, but really shared with the world. For me, I believe that is speaking. I believe that is storytelling. I believe that is inspiring people. And so I'm thrilled that in this role, I get to do that, and I get to do it in a way that helps the business. I remember at Spotify, I wanted to do this job for a long time. But it took the intersection of my passion and my skill and also the business need and the right timing for that to come to fruition. So I'm really thrilled.
I've read the Sound On report. I think it's excellent. So great work there. And you had said recently on LinkedIn that that was your favorite research report. You've done a number in that. It's your favorite. So tell us about this research and what it was about and why it is important now for Spotify and the brands that you have in tow and the brands that you'd like to bring into the fold.
Yeah. So the Sound On era was a big research project. It took us about 6 to 9 months to build this and get it out in the world, which in tech is a pretty long time, right? It's kind of like dog years. It takes a long time to build something I think of worth. So I mentioned before this research included 5,000 consumer responses, 105 marketer POVs, as well as 30 interviews with these experts. And the purpose of it was to show marketers where the future of media is going. And so in order to do that, we really had to start with history, which is this idea that voice was our original interface, right? Before we scrolled, we spoke, and before we typed, we listened. And then the screen era took over, and it was this time of optimizing for clicks and feeds. And we got faster and more measurable, which was great, but we also lost attention. Attention really splintered. And now this era that we're in, the sound on era, is this idea that voice and sound have been restored as our fundamental interface. And it's because technology has finally caught up with us, not because we're rejecting it. And so this research, what I love about it is that it is such a part of our core DNA at Spotify. It is such a continuation of who we are. For 20 years, we have always innovated in sound, always. And so now this research is a continuation of that. And it looks around the corner. I think a lot of research we see in market, understandably, is what has happened or what is happening right now. What we tried to do was look in the future a little bit more and see what's coming so marketers can prepare for that. And I love that kind of work. This is this idea of, if anyone tells you they can predict the future, they're usually wrong. But I think what we can do, what we have the responsibility to do, is have a hypothesis about it. And it's okay if we're wrong. It's absolutely fine if we're wrong. It's important to be brave and take that risk and look ahead. So I feel like this is one of the first times that we as a company have done that. And maybe we'll be right, maybe we'll be wrong, but we really believe in building towards something. And so this research really reflects that. It really reflects who we are as a company, I believe. And we've given marketers now this understanding that if the sound on era is already here, by the way, the sound on era, it's not coming, it's not in the future, it's already here. And so as audio becomes more active and interactive, if your brand doesn't have a sound on strategy, it's simply not being heard. So really giving marketers the research to show that this is coming and also giving them the strategy to meet them in that moment.
Yes. And I also would argue that your research, this kind of research, also helps your organization reduce the chances of being blindsided by
Absolutely.
a startup or an Apple or wherever podcast, and to come out of nowhere with you guys not even recognizing what they're doing.
And this is why vision and mission is so important at a company. Spotify's mission is to deliver creativity, one note, one voice, one idea at a time. And I love that vision and that mission statement, because number one, we're likely never going to achieve it, and that's okay. We're not supposed to. It's supposed to be something you can continue to work on and work toward and really move forward in. And secondly, if we know our mission, if we know our vision, that's going to enable us, just like you've said, Bob, to avoid being taken by surprise, if we can stay laser focused on what we're doing while keeping an eye on everything outside, absolutely, but really internally galvanizing around that one mission, we'll be in a much better place.
Yeah, and to understand what are the new opportunities here within your vision. Because
it
seems to me, Spotify will be doing things in 10 years that it had no idea about today.
Yeah, and I'm proof of that, right? When I started 12 years ago, we were a music company. Period. The end. That was how people knew us, which makes a lot of sense. That's when a lot of people fell in love with the brand. We were this antidote to piracy. That was why the company was founded, was because we wanted to make sure you could support and really get access to all the world's music. Now we have podcasts. We have over 7 million podcasts on platforms, several 100,000 of which are video, just like this one. We have audiobooks. I mean, you think about an industry that hadn't had a ton of innovation. It was publishing, right? And so being able to bring audiobooks to platform, and the author community, the feedback we've gotten from them has been so positive. They're telling us that their audience base is younger than it's ever been because we're really giving access to a new generation of readers. We've got music videos. We have all sorts of technology, some of which I can't talk about because it's still building. But yes, I hope our company looks different in 10 years because in tech, if you don't move at speed, you're dead. If you don't continue to innovate, you'll be gone.
Yeah. And that's got to be part of the excitement at working at Spotify versus, and I'm not going to say the ad agency world doesn't move fast. Some agencies move faster than others, but it doesn't have the same pressure that a tech company like a Netflix, like you guys, like a Facebook has to keep innovating.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, pros and cons to everything, you know?
I sent you a bunch of questions and you had a question back for me about the implications of a growing world of AI slop for thought leadership professionals. And you mentioned the importance of genuine thought leadership. So let's unpack this great question and tell me what you believe is required to produce genuine thought leadership. And are you saying slop in kind of the area of thought leadership that you've been creating points of view on? Do you see a lot of slop created by other organizations on the very issues, for instance, that your recent report?
Yes. Yes. I mean, I will say, take one look at LinkedIn. Take one look at LinkedIn where everyone now thinks that they're a thought leader because they've put into AI some LLM that they, want a POV on this topic and they get some engagement and they call it thought leadership. That's really performance rather than thought leadership, in my opinion. And I think, the internet made information available and free to everyone. LLMs, AI have made it more accessible to everyone, which means that a lot of the content that we're seeing is the same, right? It makes a lot of sense. If every company has access to the same LLMs, processed and trained by the same internet, and now really running on the same outputs and expressions of that data, it's a sea of sameness. And so, in my opinion, genuine thought leadership requires research, rigor, and risk. So research, proprietary, this is something at Spotify we're really good at, right? We have all of this incredible, rich, amount of audience insights that is not available on the web. It is proprietary. It is closed. Rigor, like I said, we spent 6 to 9 months working on this research. This idea of having real experts doing the work. Our research team is incredible and really working with external partners who can raise the credibility of that. One of my favorite parts of our project was working with other experts who are a lot smarter than I am. I just tried to keep up and learn from what they were sharing with me. And then risk. If you are saying something that's already been said, it is likely not thought leadership, in my opinion. It requires having a unique perspective. And I think this is where a lot of companies fall down because there's a lot of fear. Oh, if we say something, we're going to be held to that. If we say something wrong, we're going to look like idiots. The whole point, I believe, of what really has moved culture forward is people taking guesses, people taking educated guesses, people having hypotheses and seeing if they pan out. If no one experimented, nothing would have been discovered. So I'm a big believer, especially in that risk.
So how do you get past, so let's talk about genuine thought leadership. So, and your 3 R's, your 3 elements, what does that mean going forward? Do you think the bar for you and the research that you put out, do you think the bar is raised because we've had ChatGPT since November of 22?
Yeah, and Bob, you were early in on this. I remember somewhere hearing you say, reading you say that because AI is really raising the bar on mediocre content, right? It's like raising the prevalence of mediocre content, which means the bar for genuine thought leadership goes even higher. I think that's great news because it elevates the importance of thought leadership roles in a company. It elevates the importance of thought leadership research and marketing, this idea of putting out unique perspectives in the world. The challenge, I think, is going to be what you and I have already talked about. We believe thought leadership should be available to everyone, should be accessible to everyone, which means it becomes part of the internet, which means it gets pulled in by LLMs, which means your unique point of view then becomes everyone else's point of view. So what I keep thinking about is how can we ensure that we continue to have unique perspectives on what's happening in the world, in the industry and marketing, and keep doing it in a way that still feels authentic and fresh. It's difficult.
It's difficult. And in my view, it means you have to keep doing really unique and in-depth research.
Absolutely. And I think, the good news is that we already have a parallel model internally at Spotify. If I think about the music industry, it used to be that it was just done by humans, right? This idea of like curating, just done by humans, making mixtapes. I remember making, a mix CD when I had a crush on a guy, right? It was only done by humans. Then AI came along. And what we have done it really well at Spotify is continue to keep human judgment as part of the equation. So yes, AI absolutely helps us. Our company is built on LLMs, personalization, AI. We've been doing that for 20 years before a lot of other brands did. Now it's table stakes. What I'm finding and what our research found is that human taste is now being elevated as this very scarce asset and a more valuable currency. And it makes a lot of sense, right? You can tell AI your preferences, you can tell it your intent, you can tell it your emotions. It does not understand human taste. So in the same way that on the editorial side of the house, we have a team of over 100 editors actively exercising human taste, I believe that same approach is critical for content, for thought leadership, for research. If we don't have the human taste as part of it, people will be able to sniff it out a mile away. So this to me is more validation for thought leadership as a role, as a career, as really this path for better business outcomes.
So in a LinkedIn post in 2024, 2 years ago, you said the greatest career advice that you were ever given was about the need to focus. Now, I've heard this advice aimed at me for decades. Because
Yes.
I'm easily, I'm multitasking, I'm reading multiple things. And so you had wondered why, despite getting praised for your work up to that time, you had not been promoted.
Yes, I've been at Spotify a few years. I was getting great reviews and my development talks from my managers. I was getting good feedback from my peers, but I wasn't getting promoted. And I was starting to get a little impatient, which has always been a thorn in my side. But I went to our head of marketing and I said to him, hey, I could really use your advice. Like, I'm getting all this great feedback. I'm doing great work. It's not that I think I'm great. People are telling me and supporting me in that. Why aren't I getting promoted? And he looked at me, and I'll always remember this. He said, you're right, Jenny, you are doing great work, but you're doing a little bit of great work in all these areas instead of diving deep into one area. So you need to focus. And it stung a little bit because up until that point, I thought that versatility had been my superpower, that I was able to do all these different things and do them well for the most part. But what that taught me is that versatility gets you compliments, focus gets you a career. Focus gets you results. Focus gets you impact. And so that really changed my perspective. And so I decided to focus on the intersection of research, strategy, and storytelling. And that, the idea of instead of trying to do everything really well, focus on one thing that I do really well. And that's this work. I've proven that I do it really well. And so that focus really, oh my gosh, I'm still so grateful for that piece of advice because it's gotten me where I am today, and it's continuing to help me grow and move and deliver great work.
Yeah. And I understand the attitude perfectly of I need to, to deliver more value, to keep my job, to keep getting raises. I need to do, anything and everything I think that the company needs. And I think I could play a role. And plus I have a short attention span. I get bored very quickly. So yeah, if somebody says, oh, let's do this, or I have an idea. Yeah, I'll do that along with the 12 other things I do. So I totally understand the sentiment.
Yes.
You never become a master of anything if you're like a utility infielder in baseball.
Absolutely.
You're not going to get a full-time position if you're the utility infielder. It's an important position, but you're not going to get paid the big bucks like an Ohtani or.
Oh, great analogy as a Dodgers fan. Great analogy. And I think what I'm really interested in is, what I keep thinking about is, how is this going to change with AI, right? So there's that whole debate for many years over, generalists versus specialists. And I've done both in my career. And as I see AI coming, I almost wonder if it becomes deep generalists, right? This idea of you can still have depth, but AI is going to give you access to more. And so it's really about how you express that thought leadership. It's really about the perspective you have on it, the point of view that you have on that. So it'll be interesting to see how that changes.
Yeah. You are, from what you've written and what I can see, of course, now, is you are big on being an optimist, being optimistic in the world of work. Your dad, your father, instilled this optimism in you. And there was something about, he used to put something on a screen in front of you that, what did it say?
Yeah. So growing up, I'm one of 4 kids. I'm a triplet and I have an older sister. And so growing up, in our home, my dad on our bathroom mirror, so we saw it every day and night, put up a quote by Charles Swindoll called Attitude. And it is ingrained in me. The most important thing we have in life is our attitude. Attitude to me is more important than education, than money, than circumstances, than success, than failure. It is more important than appearance, giftedness, or skill. It will make or break a church, a company, a home. The remarkable thing is that we have a choice every day regarding the attitude we can embrace for that day. We cannot change the inevitable. The only thing we can do is play on the one string we have, and that is our attitude. I'm convinced that life is 10% what happens to me and 90% how I react to it. And so it is with you. You are in charge of your attitude.
So did you believe it back then when you...
No, of course not. Of course not. No way. I thought my dad was, I thought it was so stupid. But now, this is the, I think the challenge of life. It's only as we get older that we appreciate what we had when we were young. And I'm so grateful for that because my career has shown me that attitude is one of the few things that no reorg, no restructure, no recession can take away from me. So having a good attitude, being optimistic has really propelled me in my career. And I think it's also, another thing I think a lot about is discernment. This idea of being thoughtful about what you do in your life. So when people come to me and, they're asking for career advice and they're like, how do I climb the ladder? How do I get that role? My first response is like, should you get that role? I think a lot of ladders lead where you might not want to go. And so discernment is knowing when to climb up the ladder or walk past it. And so this idea of, again, I can control my attitude, I can discern thoughtfully about my career and my impact on the world. Those two things have really helped me.
What's your advice for others? Because I hear so much negativity today because of the economy and, of course, because of AI. It was with an insurance adjuster, a neighbor of ours asked us to open up their house to an insurance adjuster because of snow-related damage. And the insurance adjuster said to me, AI is really going to change this profession of looking at claims, at insurance claims. And we got into a discussion about, well, how could that possibly be? Somebody has to go out and size things up and tell the insurance company, yeah, it's legitimate damage. But people are really afraid of how AI is going to take their jobs, even in a role like that, where I think that can't be done by AI. You have to send somebody out. So the economy, articles about college graduates facing one of the toughest job markets. What's your advice for others who are trying to crack this world of work, especially thought leadership, and move up during these extremely difficult times?
Yeah, I mean, at first, I'll remind everyone that there have always been difficult times. Anytime large innovation comes along, there are casualties, right? So think about the automobile. Well, when the automobile started, there were casualties left and right? I mean, people didn't understand the power of these. They didn't have seatbelts. If you look back at that time, they were transitioning from horse and carriage to automobile. It was tough. It was hard. And look where we are now. I think we are going through that same transition where there are going to be challenges. There are going to be difficulties. And what I would encourage is that don't focus on the negative. Start looking forward and seeing what you can do to prepare for that, to get around it, to get ahead of it. So that's one thing. Secondly, specifically in getting work and thought leadership, I have a lot of people message me on LinkedIn asking like, how did you get in your job? Like, I want your job. How did you do it? 3 things really helped me. The first one, and I'm not just saying this because I'm on your podcast, I would say this anywhere, get your book, Competing on Thought Leadership. Okay. When I started, so I pitched this job to my head of marketing and she said yes. And then I thought, like what is thought leadership? What am I supposed to be doing? So I Googled books on thought leadership and your book was the first one to come up. And I'm so glad I read it because it just gave me a vocabulary, an architecture, a framework through which to view and then build Spotify's thought leadership strategy. So that is the first piece of advice. Find experts who know a lot more than you do about what you want to do. Secondly,
and of course, that's music to my ears. So thank you for, and we should let everybody know I didn't pay you to say that.
No. That's like, when you reached out and invited me even the podcast, I thought, what a full circle moment because I've learned so much from you. So it's a joy to be able to share with others here.
Wonderful.
Secondly, I would say, think about the impact that you want to drive. So when I think about what I want to do at Spotify, I want to make sure the work I'm doing is tied to true business outcomes. Our thought leadership work, it can't be just something pretty that sits on social or sits on our website. It has to make the sales team look more credible when they walk in the room. It has to get Spotify the first call when the CMO picks up the phone talking about restructuring their media mix. So it really has to do a lot of work and heavy lifting. So if we connect that work to problems that advertisers have, to questions that they're trying to solve, we'll be in a better place. So really think about the impact you want to drive and think about how you can do that in your work. And I think third is have a point of view. I can't tell you how many people I've interviewed, certainly at Spotify, where I ask them why they're interested in the role. And they all say to me, I just love music. I'm just a huge music fan. And I'm like, well, yeah, you and millions of other people. What is your unique perspective? What are you bringing to this job? What are you thinking about that's going to help the company? So in everything, have a unique perspective. And this doesn't mean to always be contrarian. I think social media has really empowered that. It's not always a good thing. I think it's important to have a point of view that you believe in, that you can stand behind, not just to get clicks and engagement, but to offer something special out in the world that people can think about.
How would you recognize someone who would really be good in a thought leadership, research, and marketing role? And often those are two roles. People who are really good at the research and people who are good at not doing the research, but taking it to market.
Storytelling. Yeah. For me, there's two paths to that. Research. I want to talk to someone that's asking good questions. They don't have to have the right answers. That's fine, I would say. But I want someone who's really curious, who's asking the right questions that can help us either get to the right answer or just pose the question so Spotify can be the moderator of that conversation in the industry. We don't need to know everything, but we need to be bringing the right questions. So that's something I always look for, someone who's curious. If anyone ever ends an interview with me and they have no questions for me, red flag, huge red flag. I want to be around people that make me more curious, that teach me new things and help me think about things differently. On the marketing side of the house, it's good storytellers. I want people who can reframe problems, who can use comparison and analogy to help me see something in a new way. So people that are really gifted in language. And I'll tell you right now, I can tell when people have rehearsed for something using AI because they're using the same, not this, it's this framework, or the M dash pause, things like that. I'm like, I want people who sound different, who are bringing a unique perspective in the stories that they tell.
What's your outlook on the thought leadership profession in companies like yours? Not just Spotify, but the Netflixes of the world, the Apple podcasts of the world. Do you see a growing role for people doing what you're doing?
I do. And I'll tell you why. I think our industry has always ebbed and flowed. And right now, the pendulum is swinging very far to AI, data, scale. Inevitably, it is going to swing back, as it already is. It's already moving to human, to quality, to storytelling. You need people in roles like mine to help do that work in a way that's authentic. You do. And my hope is that eventually that pendulum settles in the middle and we have both that are really, in the same way, again, like I mentioned, our editorial strategy. I really feel like we've hit a perfect balance of that, the editorial curation and the human storytelling. I think our industry needs more roles like this. I know I'm biased, but I really do believe, this is, again, this idea that humans have always shared stories. Stories, voice, sound were our original interface. It's going to come back to that. And the companies that prepare for it now are going to be ready for it.
Very good. Any questions you have for me about, since you have read my book, about
Yes.
thought leadership and Spotify, how it might apply to Spotify?
Yes, a few. So one, I'm really curious about your perspective on if all thought leadership should drive revenue or if some thought leadership should simply help drive awareness consideration for a brand. Because I think this is the ongoing debate at Spotify, in our industry. What is your perspective on that?
Well, I think the best way the thought leadership research drives revenue, well, in two ways it drives revenue. It helps you market and sell and get customers for the services you're already offering today.
Mm-hmm.
And to raise awareness of this sound on era is actually not, the 5% of the radio revenue. Sound on era is, much more, and it's growing because of these factors. Okay, well, that'll bring in more advertising, right? If the research is good and you market it well. But thought leadership research done that compares best practice with worst practice case studies. This is what led to the re-engineering concept 30 plus years ago. In your case, studying what the advertisers and the agencies who are getting the most mileage out of Spotify, right, as a medium, are doing. What are they doing? How are they planning these campaigns? How are they using Spotify, et cetera? How do they differ from the advertisers and agencies that are not getting nearly the revenue impact from using Spotify as a medium? What's the difference between these two groups of customers, right? There will be so much to learn from best practice and worst practice of things to do and not to do. And you will learn some things that could, I would argue, could turn into new services or new features of existing services at Spotify, simply by studying your best customers and how they're using your products and services.
Well, and this is a really interesting approach to it because I think the challenge in tech, we have Spotify and then we have Spotify advertising, right? We've got our B2C and our B2B. And a lot of our B2B audience fell in love with our B2C brand, right? As users, as fans. So they want to, they don't want to be sold to. They want to hear what Spotify, the brand, is thinking about, what Spotify, the brand, is looking to in the future. They don't want to hear sometimes about media formats or CPMs or things like that. So striking that balance can be really tough. And I remember reading your book and thinking, wow, this is so great that Bob is so aware of the revenue piece of this, right? This isn't like fluffy content. This is actually driving business outcomes. And I'm wondering if you can do that without talking about, without being too salesy, right? Or without, I don't know. What do you think?
Yes. In fact, the more you sell, the more you repel. So,
oh, that's great.
The insights have to drive people to say, I need to talk to you guys. You've done this study of hypothetical study here about how the advertisers that get the most impact from advertising on Spotify, what they do differently. I love that we're only doing 10% of the things that you recommend that the best are doing. And we want to talk to you guys since you seem to know a lot. You've done the research. You've talked to these premier advertisers. We want to talk to you, Spotify, about how can we incorporate some of these best practices, because those best practice advertisers, they're not going to help. They're not going to help them. You guys are in a good position to do that, right? On the basis of doing research and uncovering insights in an area that nobody really has studied before.
Right, especially with our first party data. Yeah.
Right. And so winding the clock back 30 plus years ago, this is the kind of research at the consulting firm I worked at, Index Group, CSC Index, that was paid thought leadership research and development. So at the peak of a research program that Michael Hammer and the consulting firm I worked at the peak of that program, circa 1993, 120 companies paying an average $30,000 a year to be a member of this research program. So it was paid thought leadership, paid by clients, thought leadership research. And it's a similar research format that Corporate Executive Board, CEB, used very successfully. Multi-company funded research led by somebody and a group of researchers. Research program, it was called PRISM, PRISM at the time, had 3 to 4 researchers who would, the research was all qualitative case study research. So it was by phone or in person. They'd visit people at IBM and Ford and the other company, Prudential Insurance, the other sponsors of this research. The same principles, I would argue, apply today.
Apply now.
Apply now. The research can be done by Zoom, right? Or by Teams. You don't have to go visit. You do need to convene your research sponsors who are paying money to get insights. They do like to network with each other, so you have to convene them at hotels, which become research debrief meetings.
and input into the next research you want to do, right? If you're listening to your clients, they can tell you what they're interested in, and then you grow from there.
Yes. And one of the keys to doing this research right, which is going to be in our documentary, one of the keys to doing this research well is to do confidential interviews with the people in the research program. Confidential from the standpoint of you're not going to mention their company's name or their name. You want to give them kind of the liberty to tell you things that they might not ordinarily tell you. Okay. Now, when you put your research report, when you study all these interviews, best practice versus worst practice, and you say the keys to doing this are A, B, C, and D, and here's an example of a company, it's in the, I don't know, food industry. Can't mention the name of the interviewee, but here's what we learned. They're doing the same thing a car company is doing, a bank is doing. Okay, great. Eventually, some of them will allow you to go public with their names, which makes the research even more credible, right?
Yeah.
But it's getting the practices, codifying practices that even these companies often haven't codified themselves. You're codifying the best practices. Jen, it is great talking with you, and I wish you tremendous success, more tremendous success in your career, and I look forward to staying in touch with you.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Bob, for really putting thought leadership on the map for a lot of people and continuing to share your expertise. That is very much appreciated.
My pleasure. If something in this Everything Thought Leadership episode stood out, please write it in the comments. Your input is invaluable to helping make ETL a must-view and must-listen podcast. And if you haven't yet subscribed to ETL, I'd love that too.